Hi. Welcome to our interview with UNIDOS 26. We're Sanctuary Cinema. My name is Luis Peña Alvarez, pronouns he, him.
I'm V. Bruno, pronouns she, they.
Jesus Nunez, pronouns he, him.
I'm
Mayra,
Joaquin.
oh,
Go ahead, Mayra. Go ahead.
Mayra Cortez, she, they.
I'm Joaquin. I use he, she, they pronouns.
And then I'd love to introduce my co-host, Shiloh Burton. Go ahead, Shiloh.
Hello, everyone. They, them are my pronouns, and I am so excited and honored to be having this conversation with you all. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So our first question from Sanctuary Cinema is, in your trailer, you talk about how this film is an act of protest and also a nonprofit film, which both of those things are, don't always necessarily go together. And also, I'm curious for our audience, because we're used to just like traditional documentary film screenings. Well, I shouldn't say traditional, but documentary film screenings. Can you tell us why this choice and what do you hope happens as a result of making a film that is both a protest film and a nonprofit film?
Yeah, so even from the beginning when this film was kind of conceived, created, like the original talks, the original version of this film was something obviously very timely. It was the idea emerged during the time around this time last year, or a little bit into the summer, when all the ice raids were occurring in LA. And as this was occurring, and as I was seeing the reactions of the people around me, of the community, of close friends and family, I wanted to do something that was kind of very in the moment, very impactful, very driven with a message, which isn't necessarily something I've done before. A lot of this was something that felt very timely, and that I wanted to create something with a very direct message, and that could potentially have an impact on people that needed that message at that moment. And so the original actually version of this film was something we were even planning on shooting for a lower budget, just kind of very run and gun, uh, minimalist crew, and just trying to get it out there as soon as possible, and trying to get this message, which is very targeted towards younger demographic, in high school, early college, who maybe are feeling a little apathetic in these times, especially kind of younger males in the Hispanic community, who may not be necessarily feeling too empowered, or necessarily feeling too driven to make these choices, make an impact, or kind of fight against these systems of oppression that are occurring. And so with that kind of message in mind, I was never kind of driven by the idea of like, oh, this is something that's like very festival driven. I originally just kind of wanted to drop this online, really with no incentive that it's gonna be like ad revenue or anything like that. The only reason the film kind of became a bigger production was just we started noticing a lot of people very interested in the message and trying to use it as a vehicle for their art, and to kind of make the message a bit broader. So we were really blessed with like such an incredible cast and crew, and creatives that came together, from Joaquin, Mayra, all these producers and creatives who really wanted to amplify this production, and then our DP Luisa de Anlara, and everyone that started joining the team. I started feeling like, okay, we can really kind of amplify this the most we can, and really put this story and put these characters and put this message out there. But that original kind of core idea of like, we're not really necessarily doing this for prestige. We're not doing this for festival recognition. We're not doing this to sell and produce and become this kind of massive production. The idea was always like, this is very message driven. We have a very specific demographic who we want to reach to, and that's the core idea of even into our distribution, and even into who we're choosing to showcase and exhibit this film. as people that is in organizations that are able to get it more directly to the community and more directly to the audience that it was made for.
Yeah, and I want to add, like, even when building the team, like, the idea that this is a not-for-profit film was a big part of our core mission. And so we brought on creatives like Myra, who is like also just such an activist. And I'll let her speak more about this in a minute, but she brought in such great ideas on how not only can this film be about and by the community in Los Angeles, but also support our community and vendors and the people we're making the film about and for. And Myra, would you like to speak a little bit more about your approach on producing?
Yeah, like I knew for sure if we're gonna include vendors, we should hire real vendors and like pay them instead of, renting and doing it, renting a ice cream cart or anything like that. So yeah, just like putting the people first. And then not for profit was big for me, making sure that we get this to several people, and make it available to them for free. That's the biggest part that like I want to, it's a truly a protest film, so we want it to be for community. But yeah, since the beginning, we wanted it to be for the people.
And I think too, we're really excited at this opportunity to screen in Albuquerque to expand our audience. And I think this film was really powerful for audiences. People will see a lot of themselves, a lot of their communities, a lot of the people around them through this film. And I think it's super important for that call to action to not necessarily be fight back and help. Of course, fight back and help people in LA, but specifically people in your own community as well. Like we are really excited for folks to be connected with resources and community partners and folks like Sanctuary Cinema, who are continuing to do this work in the communities around them. And I think in this time and age, it's especially important to continue to build your own community and be a part of those forces that are working for good around you.
Great, that's awesome. And a lot of your answers relate to the next question that we have, which is about, the characters are inspired by real people, right? And this is a different approach, right? Representing lived experience, which is also something that we forefront, right? In terms of our experts and our guests on the panel we forefront their lived experience. And so what was really inspiring for us to share this film with our community who's already been coming to Sanctuary Cinema is it's another example of how lived experience is where we're getting our information from, which is very different from the way that society and media is right now. And so I also think it comes with a different level of responsibility and accountability as a result too. And it can also really affect people, sometimes positively and sometimes negatively. So I'm wondering if you could talk, one or all of you could talk a little bit about your responsibility with this forefronting lived experience, and having that have the folks in the film be inspired by real folks, and how you went about that ethically, basically.
It was always something that was on the forefront of all our minds and something that we knew we needed to approach with like the utmost care. And I think Jesus and his approach really showcased that. And then the casting decisions and everyone we worked with on every stage of the project, that was always the goal. And Jesus, you want to talk a little bit more about like how you had some really strong opinions on how things should be represented and how things should not be.
Yeah, so even from the writing and the like development of the film, like something that my writing partner and I, Angel, we were constantly talking about was, authenticity and trying to not make this superficial or in a way cliche or stereotypical to the characters and the communities that we were representing. Um, Inspired by my real experience in terms of like my group of friends and the people that I knew in my life and my own experience and just the diversity that I experienced within my friendship groups in El Paso and then my friendship groups here in LA, and the diversity not only in their immigrant experiences but their communities and the different places they've been. That was something always that I wanted to represent as authentically and realistically as possible. And in the writing process, obviously, like Angel and I, we were aware that a lot of the writing that we were doing was very much centered on our own perspective, our own point of view. We're both Mexican American. We have very different backgrounds in terms of like our immigrant experiences. And so that could kind of dictate or inform the way we wrote certain characters. But we always kind of had that as a blueprint for who would we would eventually cast. Because once we started making the casting call, we really did want to encourage the actors to kind of bring in their own experience and alter the script based on their experience and how comfortable they were in bringing their own lived experiences and their backgrounds into the reality of these characters. And the script did change quite a bit in terms of the cultural references maybe a character would make, or the language they would use, or the way they would incorporate English and Spanish. We were very lucky that the actors were also very willing to join that collaborative process. We had actors from Argentina, we had actors from El Salvador, and we had to change the script. We just sat down like at a park and started reading the script, and it's like, does that feel realistic? Does that feel kind of cliche? Would you say that? And really kind of very openly, we just talked about like that maybe the experiences or prejudices that we've experienced just based on where we came from, our physical features, and how that impacts the level of maybe political drive that maybe some of us might experience or may not have experienced. And so just by being super open with one another and being super open with our intentions and where honestly the inspiration for these characters came from. Like there's characters in this film who are a little irreverent and maybe a little offensive, and we were very careful in why we were making those characters speak that way and speak in ways that could offend someone in the audience just based on the specificity of their insults to one another. And again, those are based on reality, and they're based on how I've seen members of my community, based on their experience, based on their background, interact with each other, maybe in a careless way, and really highlight that even within our community, there's ways to grow. There's room to become more aware of how we need to be united and not kind of cause division between ourselves. And so all of those aspects were very, very relevant and important in shaping these characters, making sure that they were authentic, making sure that even when we were threading the line of maybe something that feels offensive or in a very specific way, that it had a purpose, and it had a purpose of showcasing these characters' growth and maybe the lack of growth in certain characters.
And I also think to go back to the question a little bit, or the second part of the question, about lived experience and documentary. I think this film is coming at a very interesting time where we're kind of creating it while this is still occurring. And so, in that sense, creating a fictional narrative is the only way in some forms to like really tell this story with truth in a way that documentary might negatively expose the people the documentary is about. The fiction is kind of like still telling the truth, but also like rooted in lived experience, but also has the benefit of being fake and providing that protection.
Mm-hmm. And another aspect in terms of protecting that, obviously we wanted to capture elements that were very authentic, and so we shot in the real, like on location. We shot in Echo Park, we shot in different areas of the community. We shot at a real, like a home, which our actor Eric was very open to let us shoot in his family home and kind of let us use the authentic space and try to capture that. But we were also very careful in trying to make sure none of it was exploitative or felt like we were, again, trying to commodify or trying to sell something from an outside experience. Every time somebody lets us into their space, we try to make sure they were not only properly compensated, but felt respected in the way we were representing them on the film. And so I think it did start all with how we wrote the characters and how we made the characters interact and how it developed as we were bringing in the talent, but also all the way in terms of the spaces that we were shooting in and the areas and the location we just had to be very present and very open and very aware of the fact that we're kind of in some aspects we're blurring the line between just fictional representation narrative and kind of a more documentary approach, and we just wanted to be as respectful as possible and taking input from other people and their experiences so that, again, to be respectful, be authentic, and avoid exploitation in any way.
Thank you so much. It
Yeah.
sounds like there's a lot of collaboration, and authenticity is part of the way you get to authenticity is through collaboration. So I'm going to let Luis take it away.
Yeah, and one thing that you brought up, Jesus, is the fact that you have different Latin identities throughout this. Like you mentioned that there's an Argentinian, there's a Salvadorian, Mexican American, obviously. And just with that, I was thinking like the different privileges that you have with each identity. Uh, there's different racial identities, different ethnic identities within that. And so one thing that I noticed from your bio in your Seed and Spark was that you were trying to deconstruct the monolithic myth about the Latin identity, that not everybody is in the same practices. And so I just wanted to see what do you hope your audiences walk away understanding from those nuances. And anybody can chime in into this.
Mhm. For me personally, I think something that's kind of been a pet peeve of mine and kind of annoyance in representation, like in Hollywood, is they kind of, a lot of these kind of bigger productions and kind of, again, like very commercialized and very polished, they've kind of created this like monolithic kind of Latinx identity that kind of doesn't necessarily pay respect or truly integrate different aspects that may come from different cultures and from different backgrounds. Like I mentioned, I'm from my family's from Mexico. They're from Ciudad Juárez, Chihuahua, and even just from Mexico, even just from the different, just that country itself is so diverse. It's such a big country, and you can be from northern Mexico or like Baja California, and just those differences already like don't feel represented and don't feel like they've been kind of properly integrated or addressed in most entertainment, and much less the differences that come in all of Latin America and in all the diversity of those rich cultures. And truthfully, like as I was writing this with Angel, like I did want to highlight, like you said, the different levels of privileges that may come from different experiences. And that's something that really informed the attitudes of a lot of characters and the characters that we were kind of putting on screen. That was something that was from the very beginning, the conversations we wanted to address, and the fact that, yes, like like me being from El Paso is very different from being from LA, and being from Chihuahua is very different from being from El Salvador or Colombia or Argentina. And all these differences make it richer, but they also sometimes create conflict that isn't necessarily very present in entertainment or necessarily hasn't been addressed or hasn't been kind of deconstructed. Because the only way to really stand in solidarity with one another is to deconstruct those conflicts, deconstruct those controversies, deconstruct those levels of prejudices within the community. So, for example, we have characters who are born in the United States, but have a darker complexion in the film. And we have another character who's more irreverent and more kind of flippant, and he throws offhand comments like, ay, tú con el nopal en la frente, which is like a very kind of derogatory term in usage within Latino culture, and especially Mexican culture, where it's kind of saying that, oh, like you won't pass off as American, you look indigenous, you look like you're from Mexico, you look like who are you trying to pass off? And it's also like this character, he was born in the US, he doesn't really speak Spanish that much, and that kind of separation that we ourselves kind of create. And again, where like we had a character who originally we wrote as Mexican American called El Güero, uh, kind of based on even my own experiences with lighter complexion and the differences I noticed and the privileges that comes with it. And that character evolved. We ended up casting an Argentinian actor, but those same level of privileges are still present. Obviously, the experience of someone like myself who is born in the United States, second generation immigrant, I have lived in Mexico, but obviously being here, I would get treated differently with just by how I look. And even within my own family, there's such a diversity in terms of physical features, accents, and how we feel represented in this country. And it does result in being treated differently. And it's easier when you're kind of in a position of more privilege to turn a blind eye to persecution or prejudices within your own community. And that is something we really wanted to tackle. A lot of these characters in the film kind of had the attitude of like, oh, well, it's not really happening to me. I'm kind of safe. Whether that's because you're a citizen or your physical features or whatever those differences might be. And so that was something that Angel and I really talked at length in deconstructing and explaining, and with the actors as well. And that was every kind of decision flowed from that. There's a scene, which is my favorite scene in the film, uh, that Angel wrote, which they're all talking about their favorite soccer players. And in that conversation, it feels very kind of superficial. They're just having fun. But even in which players they picked, we're seeing the different levels of prejudices and the different levels of privileges that each of them might have. Like one of them wants to be the best, wants to be like the most kind of recognized, and he picks someone like Messi and doesn't really give it a second thought. But the other character, the one I spoke about, who's darker complexion, born in the U.S. but doesn't necessarily speak Spanish, but loves like it was really impacted by the representation of a player like Hugo Sanchez. Like he picks him, and someone else like shuts him down and says like, "Oh, that guy's such a show off," which was a real prejudice that specific player faced, in which just because he was a prominent player who made it to the European leagues, who made it outside of Mexico, he was being torn down because he was brown, because he was a person of color. And these youthful characters in that offhand comment don't even realize that they're doing the same thing. And so really that kind of informed everything about the characters and the conflicts and issues we wanted to tackle.
Yeah, and I mean, Hugo Sanchez himself is a very complicated character himself, but yeah, it did make me think, uh, you know, there is a sort of, because I saw that teaser and I saw that conversation, and I thought to myself, that's an interesting conversation that I've had, with my friends when I was younger. And it was reflective of who we chose and how we went about it too. But I noticed also the one thing about your films that inspired you or that you had in your bio were Ruda y Cursi y Tu Mamá También. Um, and so I was just curious as to why those films produced by the Cuarón brothers and with Gal García Bernal and Diego Luna, why they were like so influential, distinct to Unidos 26, and just like what you were trying to reach for with putting that together. Um, yeah, and just like what those films like mean to each and one of you, if you have anything to add to that.
Mhm. Well, I think obviously there's like the visual style that we wanted to invoke a lot with Y Tu Mamá También, but to me, really what stands out with Tu Mamá También is like the authenticity of the characters and the way they kind of interact with each other. Like I don't think like youth is such a difficult thing to kind of authentically represent in film, especially like a lot of, again, like mainstream media is kind of written by like older artists who may not necessarily kind of quite have a grasp into like the way the youth speaks and the way they interact. And there was such a naturalism between the characters in Tu Mamá También, where like they speak over each other and they're saying really irreverent and like borderline offensive stuff throughout that film. And it's just kind of very like very honest in its depiction, even in depicting the negative aspects of those characters, the irreverence, the stupidity in at times of youth. And that's something that was really a driving force when we were writing these characters. We wanted to capture that idea, like these are just kids. And when you're a kid, when you're like even right out of high school, you're gonna be stupid and you're gonna say stuff that in a year you're already going to be cringing at and regretting. And I know there's stuff that I regretted how I behaved when I was in middle school, in high school, and being again, you're unaware of maybe the certain privileges you have, you're unaware of how comments may come off. Like yeah, in high school, my one of my best friends, he is Mexican American, doesn't speak a word of Spanish, and he faced a lot of like bullying in high school because of it. Um, and like they would make fun of him, they call him no sabo, call him all these things, and like I did partake in that. Like I can't say like oh like I would never like no like I was part of that youthful group. I was part of like that irreverent and kind of like oh whatever's funny and whatever like gets the rest of the group laughing. And of course, like back then in high school, middle school, I was like the only one in my friend group with like a thick Mexican accent or like Chihuahua accent, and I got my fair set of jokes as well. And now like I'm still friends with him, and we look back and like that was so stupid. Like why would we even like do that? Why would we react in that way? And seeing the characters of Tu Mamá También, like I recognize those characters. Like I recognize the way they spoke. They recognize the way they interacted with each other, and especially the fact like in Tu Mamá también there's like the cultural and the uncertainty in the background that's always looming. There's like arrests going on, there's like deaths going on, and then they stop at a certain cafe and the camera lingers on the workers and the camera lingers on these characters that are easy to ignore, easy to kind of like dismiss because especially the film is about these two characters. And again, there's also a difference between the socioeconomic background between these two characters. One of them lighter skin and comes from a rich family who's trying to appeal to the indigenous communities, even just by his name and the way they named him and the way they're presenting themselves because they're very politically driven. And then the other character who comes from a lower socioeconomic background. And when they kind of eventually do have conflict, you see those classes insults coming their way with like calling him Nako and like these kind of insults that are very cutting and always kind of like under the surface and not really addressed until like tensions rise, until that conflict arises. So all of those concepts are something we really wanted to explore also with UNIDOS, but in a different cultural context here in the United States and seeing kind of the same way, like the political unrest in the background, the political unrest that they may easily ignore, they may easily dismiss, the tensions between them that they might initially dismiss, all come to the surface in moments of tension. Those are aspects that really inspired just the way we narratively formed the story, but also how we ended up shooting it and how we ended up representing it visually.
And Y Tu Mama También was in a lot of ways kind of like the North Star, and Jesus had such a clear vision of what he was trying to achieve and what he meant by invoking those references, that when we were like approaching cast and crew members especially and said like this is what we're trying to do and these are our references for this film. Like I remember like Luis, our DP, like also just like really immediately connected and it's been a powerful film to so many people. And I think like the vision of why we were trying to go in that direction like spoke to everyone who ended up being our collaborators on the project.
And I think too something that's so powerful and interesting about this film is we're seeing these characters grapple in real time with radicalization, with stepping up and protesting and doing all of these things in much the same way that I think much of the country is doing right now. And I think it's even more powerful that these are kids starting to discover critical thinking and starting to discover what it means to be radicalized and what it means to support your neighbors and what it means to protest in the street. And it can be so powerful for even older people to recognize sort of the younger generation doing that. And so I think that's another important piece to talk about in this film that really can be inspiring to anyone of any age as they are discovering and trying to figure out how they can support this movement and how they can step up and support each other, our neighbors.
Mara,
Shalyn, you want to follow it up?
yeah, sure.
Sorry.
I just wanted to give Mara a chance to say anything before I ask my next question, if you wanted to add to it.
I think she just texted me that she might be having some technical difficulties.
Okay, no worries.
Um,
So this is good though, because it flows naturally to our next question about narrative sovereignty, right? And so one of the reasons that distinguishes sanctuary cinema from other sort of documentary ideas is that the conversation, the community collaboration and conversation is more important than the film. We use the film as a vehicle to get the conversation started, if that makes sense. And because of that, it's really important that all of our films participate in what we call narrative sovereignty. So the people behind the camera and the people in front of the camera are having a similar lived experience. They understand, they speak the same language in terms of cultural experience and lived experience, right? A lot of times with documentary, like the National Geographic model, right, is like somebody from the outside swoops in and frames the image and the picture and the story how they do with their preconceived notions and maybe they do research, maybe they don't, but it's not their lived experience. And we're trying to we're trying to remove that barrier again, because it leads to stereotypes and also a skewing of the story of the reality of it, and especially the nuances of like our lived experience. And it's messy being humans and there's contradictions. And so even though your film is fiction, it has this narrative sovereignty aspect in all the things that we've been talking about today, in terms of like, saying like it's fiction, it's not real or whatever, right? It's made up, but it comes from this lived experience foundation in all aspects, even with the fact that you are collaborating with your talent in talking about dialogue and those sorts of things. And so this is a long way to ask this question, but I just wanted to give you the context of kind of what our community in Albuquerque is thinking about who comes to sanctuary cinema. Narrative sovereignty is the foundation of everything we do, right? Who gets to tell what story based on what they're doing in terms of their lives. So I would love to hear from each one of you. What does narrative sovereignty mean to you? And maybe how you think it shows up in this film beyond what I just said, if there's anything you'd like to add, but also kind of like what it means to you and to tell the story on your own terms, because we've been talking about that kind of this whole conversation.
Yeah, it's like I think, yeah, every aspect of it is kind of very much driven by that idea of narrative sovereignty. Like I mentioned, a lot of the way I even approached from the very beginning how we were writing these characters was from that frustration of seeing how monolithic and not necessarily accurate representation we've been getting from mainstream media. Not to say that we haven't like improved the way representations occurring in film and television and music. I think we've come a long way, but there's still aspects again where it feels at times overly polished and overly commercialized and not necessarily buying that the voices behind the scenes are necessarily the the voices that are present in the film or present in the narrative. And again, to varying levels of success uh, or not in what I've seen, but that was very much a driving force. Even from the beginning, we wanted something to this is like more realistic to what I've experienced, and this is more specific. I think there's a lack of specificity in a lot of times when you're trying to produce something that you haven't necessarily experienced yourself. The thing that we knew, however, is that because this film in particular is trying to be so encompassing in terms of diversity, in terms of very specific in terms of people's experiences, Angel and I, as we were writing, we knew even our perspective was going to be limited, and we knew we had to rely on the perspective of everyone else involved as well. And so the script, if you read the first draft of the script, it reads very Mexican American, but again, it's because it was written by two Mexican American or creators, and we were very specific in our references, and we were very specific in what we wanted to achieve. But we also left it very open so that when we did bring in that talent, when we did bring those actors, they could take ownership of the characters as well. And I told them many, many times that if you want to throw in a cultural reference in there that maybe I don't understand, just run it by me real quick so that we make sure that it's congruent with the story, with the characters, with the context, and then throw it in there. Because I don't care if like 90% of the audience maybe doesn't understand that throwaway line or joke or comment, but the people that it's meant for will understand it and will see themselves reflected in a way that maybe necessarily more kind of superficial, external kind of representation might not necessarily achieve. I did also want to add that this extended beyond just the cast and the creative team for writing. Even our DP, Adrian Lara, he was born here in LA. He's very much in the Echo Park community. And as we were location scouting, as we were choosing what we wanted to represent visually, he was a huge help as well. And so leaning on his expertise, leaning on his experience, and leaning into trying to, again, be authentic, I was very much always open to like, what do you think about this? What do you think about capturing this or trying to capture this moment? And really kind of letting him be a creative voice as well. And it really shows, I think, in the final product, a lot of what makes this film special is the visuals that he was able to capture. And again, within the groundwork of the film and within what we were trying to say, but really allowing him to pour his experience and pour his reality into every aspect of the cinematography as well. And so I think we just had to be very open in understanding that even if the script and these characters are based on my experience, I had to be allow myself and allow the film to mold itself by the creators and by all the voices involved.
I think also like from my perspective as a producer, trying to foster an environment that is thinking about narrative sovereignty, like comes in the forms of like creating an on-set environment where everyone like can be this open and feel like secure in their art and what they're bringing to the table and know that they're going to be treated with respect. And I think in this set, often that just meant like we're shooting on these street corners. Okay, where's the bathroom? How can I make sure the actors have access to bathrooms and water and everything they need to do their job? In these like kind of like we were just out on street corners sometimes, like they're like asking businesses if we could like come and use the restroom, and if that wasn't an option, like that was, I think, like a big part of creating this environment where it's like we can focus on that. Sorry, I think I got a little nervous there, but it was always just a point that everyone involved on the set was like thinking about how they could bring their own stories and express themselves. And I think as a producer, it was my job to make sure everyone felt safe to do so.
I think too, to piggy off what V was saying, I'm an associate producer on the film. I wasn't necessarily as involved in the filmmaking itself, but helped support Jesus and V and Nitroglycerin and Mida especially to do the best work that they can. And I think it was abundantly clear from early meetings how much the team was interested in supporting and creating this culture of narrative sovereignty and empowering their collaborators and making sure that everyone, like Vi just said, felt like they could talk about anything. And I think that's really the first step in creating narrative sovereignty is that you, the creator, are able to set the scene and set the stage for your collaborators to feel safe and empowered to have those conversations, especially if they're difficult conversations. Um, I was excited to hear, and I'm sad that Maida isn't here to talk about it, but I'll briefly say how invested Maida was in and really supporting and making sure that Maida was the voice for a lot of the vendors that we were talking to and really being that bridge through the production team to a lot of the vendors and really speaking up and advocating for any part of the community that we were working with. Um, and I think too, like this idea of empowerment happens at every single stage of production. And I think with my production company, we're very focused on making sure that all of the cast and crew and everyone we work with understands the deal memos that we're giving them, that we're not just like sending these contracts and they have to sign. We have this entire pamphlet and everything, and we're always available for folks to ask questions because a lot of times the communities that we're working with, this is maybe one of the first times that they've signed a contract like this. And so we want to make sure that everyone really knows what they're signing up for and is empowered to ask questions and have those conversations. In a similar way, Jesus talked about licensing a song from this local ska band, and it's really important to us that they understand the contract that they're signing, and they want that we also on our end are thinking about what are they actually signing, like what rights and who's keeping the rights to different things. We wanted to make sure that they are retaining all of the rights to the song and that this will not impact anything future that they want to do with the song, since they're an independent band and an indie band. And so those are the things as well as we mentioned that we're thinking about as producers and trying to create this culture of empowerment and narrative sovereignty.
That's amazing. I feel like this is what true collaboration looks like. Like people throw that term around all the time, right? Oh, we're collaborating. But then somebody really just does their thing and tries to convince you that the way they want to do it is the only way, if that makes sense, right? And so what I love about this conversation that we've been having is this is what collaboration looks like when you're making a film, because no one can make a film by themselves, period. It takes a whole village, right? And the fact that you all are including the paletero cart, folks, and like all of these things in there is speaks to your level of integrity, authenticity, thoughtfulness, like really thinking about what this means. And it can be messy it doesn't necessarily go smoothly and it takes longer time, but it also leads for a more robust, effective, uh story that feels a lot more like it's actually inclusive in all the ways that people think they want but don't know how to do. So I feel like this conversation has done an amazing job of like showing that. And so it leads to our last question. And then obviously if there's anything else you want people to know. So I guess it's a two-part, but like in the film we also see moments of joy, right? Which a lot of times with traditional documentary, it's more like trauma porn and there is no joy and it's very one-dimensional or two-dimensional, right? So whether it's like friendship or soccer or just like everyday life, and this is, coexisting simultaneously with like very traumatic, heavy realities of like colonialism and deportation machine and the prison industrial complex around and how that relates to colonialism and big time sports that talk about unity, but you're actually doing unity in the way you're making the film versus FIFA and all these other places, right? And so we really see beyond narrative sovereignty, we really want to have radical joy. We really see that as an important form of resistance in the films that we show so that it isn't one dimensional and two dimensional. And so I would love to end with like your experience with this concept of radical joy as a form of resistance, either in the making of the film, creating it, like however it interacts with your specific role. We would love to hear about that. And then at the end, we would like to ask one more little follow-up.
I think that's an amazing question, and I think there's two aspects of it that I really believe became alive in this production. The first aspect is, like you said, we don't necessarily want to do just like constant trauma, constant pain in these depictions. It can get very tiring, but also it can kind of lose the real humanity and the real impact that we're trying to tell. Something like the scene that is in the teaser that was very important to us to include that at the very beginning, which is just moments of these kids and being youthful and loving, and even within the family, the mother character. That was something that was very important to us in multiple aspects. We wanted to show that love and that care that it comes with community. I think also specifically the reason we wanted the mom character to be so like on the same level and same wavelength of comedy that these kids were is that also there's a bit of a stereotype in Latino communities of like the strict, rigid parents and how like they're always afraid of the parents and afraid of like that kind of conservatism that does exist a lot in Latino communities, especially from like older, more kind of seasoned individuals or parents or grandparents. And we really wanted to show the aspect that a lot of times, yes, that's true, but also there's so much warmth and so much like joking and so much comedy, and they are able to kind of be part of that same group. And so it was very important to us in that aspect to show that joy, show that community as a tribute to the people we're making this film for, to our friends, our family, and that kind of that level of like, hey, you recognize these characters, you recognize the joy that they're feeling, the warmth that they're feeling. On the kind of darker level, we also wanted to show what's at stake. So by showing the actual community and the actual love between these characters, you're showing also what people are at stake at losing, and why this film and why these movements and why these things are so important is to preserve the things that we love, to preserve the people that we love them, to preserve those connections that we have, because they can so quickly fall apart or be taken away as they happen in this film. The second aspect I think that I wanted to talk about in terms of joy is just the joy we felt on set, being together and actually making this film. There were times like the actors just started riffing and laughing, and they were saying, "Oh, this doesn't really even feel like work." And within like just a couple hours of getting to know each other on the rehearsals, they were already joking and they were already like coming together. And by the end of the film, something I kept hearing consistently within our cast and crew was like how special it felt to do films with people that you really connected with on a cultural level, and in terms of the story you wanted to tell. It felt kind of like being with family, and being with family, making the film that we all recognized and we all felt that we were putting part of ourselves into. So I thought that was a really important aspect, is the fact that there was a genuine joy in the film, even though we were shooting some very dark scenes and we were shooting some very intense moments. We all kind of felt safe and protected with one another. And another kind of third aspect of this is, I think us, like our community and of Latinos and Hispanics, and we tend to have a very like comforting sense of humor, even during dark times, even during times when it gets hard. Like there's always humor, even in the darkest of moments. And sometimes, yeah, it feels a little irreverent, and sometimes it feels a little bit uh, inappropriate, but you can't be afraid and laughing at the same time, if that makes sense. And so I think humor is something that is really important, especially to me and to the people I work with, in terms of trying to kind of deal with these traumatic events and deals with these issues. there were moments, even the characters, like the actors, they were making jokes that about the situation that was happening. And yeah, they were kind of dark jokes, and they were kind of self-aware and very kind of at times irreverent, but it showed like the way we kind of cope with one another through humor and through kind of bringing joy even in the darkest of moments. And that was something that really impacted me as we were shooting kind of these darker moments. The fact that they could still derive a comedy and joy and connection from it.
Yeah, I think like everyone was there to work, but there was just also just so much laughter and joy on set. And everyone like was so serious about this film and cared so deeply about it, but that never saw itself in like these arguments about like creative control. It was always just kind of fun and laughing and making sure that like we got our stuff done and we got the shots and we moved on. But it was a really good time and a really fun set. And it was such a privilege to work with all these people. And in terms of like creating the cast and casting everyone, we worked with an amazing casting director, Juliana Gentile. And I just like, she created a friend group. Like these people are coming from this and they're a real friend group now. Like everyone's this was not just like a fake friend group. This became a real group of friends who all love soccer. And just everyone brought so much joy and passion for their specific trade to this project. And it really shines through to the film.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I was on set, but I do want to quickly share a little anecdote about the wrap party. And I think that V and Jesus might have been amazing at creating opportunities and spaces for people to practice radical joy and to be able to be in community with each other. And it's not even like I think this team is so good at as you mentioned collaboration at choosing their collaborators very carefully, and making sure that everyone is aligned in that way to foster these amazing spaces. Um, so I just want to give kudos to them and the entire team, and also Sanctuary Cinema for even asking this question. I think this is such an important
Mhm.
thing that people are not discussing enough. And these platforms and these stories need to be told more and need to be widely shared. And we need to continue to create these spaces for radical joy, especially against the backdrop of everything that's happening. So thank you.
For sure. And the last question we have is, what do you hope our audience, and I don't really want to say audience because we really believe viewing a film is an active process and not a passive reception, which is why we don't always show the whole film. We show an excerpt so that we can have the conversation going, right? So we use it as a vehicle to start the conversation. So it's not really audience. Let's say our community members who are live at the event. What do you hope that they take away? What's one thing you hope that they take away from this film, and or a call to action that you have for them that you want them to do or think about or be after watching UNIDOS 26?
Um, Two things that I want to inspire a certain level of hope, and not necessarily, obviously it's a very dark time and it's very difficult to find moments of hope, but I think in seeing the main arc of this character who goes from careless, youthful, apathetic, and seeing them kind of become activated and seeing them become motivated, I think is really the driving force for this film. And from the very beginning, is just to motivate a sense of optimism, but also urgency in terms of how you should be interacting, what you should be paying attention to around you. Speaking of Los Callejeros and their song, um, one piece of lyric that like I think really kind of told me like, oh, this is the perfect song to kind of connect with the film. Is they use the phrase "ponte trucha," which just means like be aware, be pay attention, and that's really kind of what I want, like the core message of like specifically to our target audience, which is kind of the younger demographic, the younger people who will connect with these characters and who maybe aren't paying attention or are turning a blind eye or feeling like they're safe. Um, Specifically in the Hispanic community, but also outside of it. Obviously, ICE isn't just targeting Latinos; it's targeting everyone from different immigrant communities. And so that idea of like be aware, be attention, pay attention, because you're not powerless in this, is really what I want people to derive from this.
I think something I also have been thinking a lot about is how people who might not be like activated or engaged maybe have like a distaste of wanting to engage because it's so like it's hard topics to comprehend and it's depressing and maybe there's a fear of like maybe they can't handle these tough topics. And I think what this film really shows is that in this space, like by engaging with and paying attention to what's going on in the world, you create and find community. And there's just so much joy in the community. And even though maybe you're grappling with really hard topics, there is always laughter there as well. And I think the film shows that really well. And I hope it inspires people to want to get to know their neighbors better and have a friend group where you all play soccer, but also can rely on each other when things get hard.
And I think you put it aptly, the community aspect I think is so important. And as I'm sure your audience already knows, just by virtue of being the community that surrounds Sanctuary Cinema. But I think twofold, like there is a place for everyone in the movement. Everyone has skills and things that you can contribute. And I think that we are fortunate enough to be able to contribute art into the movement. But that might not be true for someone else. They might be more well suited to building community or more well suited to leading or more well suited to showing up. Just by being there, you are an active participant in the revolution. And so by being connected and as part of this community, I really hope that people walk away feeling empowered to take up that space that they can and to put their skills towards the work that they and everyone wants to contribute to.
Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, go ahead and close this up, please.
Yeah, no, we really want to appreciate you. I really love how this serendipitously worked out. You know, months ago when Jocelyn reached out to us, to me, and was like, "Hey, you guys, you follow each other. How like I just worked on this thing." And yeah, I was tracking what you guys were doing, and I was like, well, I hope they are like you finished, you've done all that. So I'm really glad that you guys have been. We feel so honored that you've trusted us to screen this, and we feel like, yeah, this is exactly what we want to be showing. We want to be showing our viewers exactly this, that there is films out there that are fictional narrative put together, but they still have real people behind them and they still have real stories. And it's scary and also um, saddening that it happened during this time that you guys had to put this together. But at the same time, this is how you resist and this is how you put the world out uh, in your own view. And so, um, yeah, I really appreciate you guys doing this, and we really appreciate you being part of this next screening. So, um, we are so happy that you guys are going to show up, and we're so excited to show this film to everybody here in Albuquerque, and we can't wait for the world to see it.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
having us. It's been so amazing connecting with you and your community in Sanctuary Cinema and reconnecting with Shiloh, who knew me as an irreverent high schooler that this film was about, and being able to kind of, I feel that Shiloh was like a big part in the reason that I continued to pursue art, and to be able to show this at Sanctuary Cinema just feels so serendipitous and perfect, and we're so excited.
Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, in a former life, I was a high school teacher of film and photography. So I don't know if our community knows that here in Albuquerque. Most people know, but that's okay. It's fine. I love
Okay,
it.
I'm
And
sorry.
yeah, no, it's great. I mean, that's what I love about people who are committed to authenticity and integrity and collaboration and horizontal power when it comes to storytelling, so that it can become fuller and have a more impact, is a very small community. I feel like it's like, here we are, I'm in Albuquerque now, not in California anymore, you're in LA, not in the Bay, and then here we are meeting again, whatever, 7 years later or something. I can't remember when you graduated, but like, it's been a minute.
It's been more than 7.
Yeah, right. Like, because COVID messed up our sense of time. Like, let's just be honest. Miss Rona, I'm like, it's either BC before COVID or AC after COVID. Like, that's what I know. So this was BC. This was before COVID when I was doing that kind of stuff. But anyway, I really appreciate it. And I think that's, again, like, belonging creates a certain amount of joy. And when you are experiencing marginalization and stereotypes and oppression, it's really difficult to find that belonging. And so it's like, that is like you're talking about making this film, there was just radical joy embedded within that, because I think of the sense of belonging that comes from telling the truth authentically from multiple perspectives. And that's what we get to experience as Sanctuary Cinema. Like, I have like goosebumps, because it's like, it's work, but it doesn't feel like work. It feels like living into your purpose and your passion. And so it's like super full circle moment to go from like doing like the Directing Change Film Festival like competition to like, here we are now, and so I really appreciate you all. We are super honored, and we're going to see everybody on the 23rd of April, 2026 at Fusion, hopefully, and then also in the future. We have great things to announce, and super happy to host you, and thanks for being incredible collaborators.
Thanks to you. Super grateful for the opportunity, and really, really excited to work with you all.
Thank you all
See
so
you on the
much.
23rd.